the Summoner. The Summoner is the latest class from MCDM for Drawsteel. It was designed by Willie Abeel and it's designated as a master class, which basically means it's a little bit more complicated for players to run, and probably isn't advised for new players. It's also a little bit more on the DM side. I would say less that is more difficult, but it's more to think about in the sense of you might not know how to approach challenging them in the same way, which is why they give some advice in the PDF for that. Now, what does the Summoner do? Well, they summon things. It tends to be lots of little things rather than one big thing, like you might have played in other games. I know, for example, in 5e, you tend to summon like a couple of big things. I'm thinking, like summoning devils, or occasionally summoning lots and lots of little things, but it's more about managing stat blocks and rolling attacks. It becomes a big add-on to your normal play. This Summoner is built from the ground up for that purpose. Your whole thing is summoning. You have some abilities that aren't strictly summoning, but basically it's all in support of that one fantasy rather than kind of tacked on. So your heroic resource is Essence, the same as the Elementalist, and similar to the Elementalist, you get 2 at the start of your turn, but you then get additional Essence when one of your minions is killed. I think it's the first one that's killed in a round, and you can also reduce the cost of your either summon or heroic abilities by sacrificing one or more minions in the process. The subclasses are really key to the Summoner and inform a lot of how it runs. So we're going to dive straight into those. So we have the Circle of Blight, the Circle of Graves, the Circle of Spring, and the Circle of Storms, which could also be interpreted as demons, undead, fairies, and elementals. Your classics. Now, each of these has their own portfolio of minions. You can't really mix and match. If you're a demon summoner, you summon exclusively demons, and so on. They do have their own little unique bits of flavour. So the Demon Summoner is about harnessing the sort of hunger of demons, and they're a little bit more friendly fire. They can deal damage to your allies and things, but they're really about sort of dishing out damage. If you like that fantasy, that's what you're there for. You've got the Circle of the Graves with undead, so you're summoning undead, and you're probably using them to sort of debuff your enemies. You put lots of bodies in their way, and sort of fulfilling that kind of bring your enemies back from the dead fantasy. Your Fairy Summoner is buffing your own allies, so they can drop effects and give people extra recoveries or let them spend recoveries. And your Circle of Storms is your Elemental Summoner, and they can transform the battlefield with areas of effect. So, for example, they can summon a Walking Boulder, which is a big stone elemental, and when it dies, it leaves a big block of stone in its place. And they all come with cool little riders linking into that. So the Undead Summoner can literally speak to the dead, the Demon Summoner can send souls, that kind of thing. So they're kind of reinforcing the fantasy of those stereotypes. Archetypes. They also have a couple of tweaks away from other classes, so they don't have a normal free strike the way other classes do. They have the Summoner Strike, which deals just a little bit of damage, because what they're trying to push you towards is using Strike for Me, which is where instead of using their own free strike when an ally lets them use it, they command all their minions to do it instead. There's a roll involved, so it's either a couple right up to all of them, if you roll really well. They also have the Minion Bridge maneuver, which is basically where you can line up your minions, and if you shift onto one, it can carry you all the way to the end with one shift. This is cool if you're trying to get out of a hotspot in combat, but also if you want to sort of traverse terrain and things. We've had them literally used as bridges before, or to help carry people up cliffs and things. It's pretty cool. The Summoner also has the least health of any class, and I think that's probably, as we all understand, because they put a lot of bodies in the battlefield and those bodies absorb a lot of damage. They also get sort of commands and things where the other classes get kits. Although they do get a Summoner kit later on. And as I mentioned earlier, they get a bunch of heroic abilities which are used to buff their minions and their allies. And as they level up, you basically get more minions, more abilities, and so on. The Summoner is a really cool addition. I have played one a little bit, but I've played alongside one a lot. And it definitely has a big impact on the game in the sense of it doesn't feel like any RPG experience I've had otherwise. Like, I've played with summons. It's a fantasy I enjoy, but I've never come across a class that lets me actually do it this way before. So things like the summoner often doesn't even roll on their turn, depending on what they're doing. But if they're just commanding their minions to fight for them, it's flat damage. So the summoner turns don't actually take longer. It's kind of just in line with everyone else. But I would say it adds a little bit of complexity. For example, for the director, do they attack the minions or do they attack the summoner? Can they afford to do both? Can they afford not to do both? It adds a little bit more complexity, as I mentioned earlier on. So worth getting your director, if you're playing the summoner, to check out the PDF as well, because there's a little bit of information at the end. And the same for the summoner player. There's some advice at the end of that document that helps you know how to run your pool in a sort of tactical way. But yeah, that's the summoner.